afternoon, everybody. My name is Gao Xeng Hui. My presentation part is the silence and places of studying sex and gender. There have three parts. The first one is history of the study of silence differences. Second, conclusion of after size, how large are the sex differences. And last one, minimalisis and maximalisis. No, we start history first. By reading, we can know early attention to sexual differences was relatively small. Until 1974, McBee and Jacqueline praised the class's book, Psychology of Sex Differences. Then people started to do a lot of research on this topic. Since McBee and Jacqueline's early work, research have developed a more precise quantitative research. They called meta-analysis. Meta-analysis did not become popular until the middle 1980s. So we have next question. How large are the sex differences? The conclusion of after size will tell you. The most conclusion used statistic in meta-analysis is the after size or the statistic. The statistic is used to emphasize the after in standard deviation units. You can see Chapter 2. A D of 0.15 means that the average difference between the two groups is half of the standard deviation. D 1.00 means that the difference between the groups is a complete standard deviation. A D quarter to 0.25 means that the difference between the two groups is a quarter of the standard deviation. An after size can be quite true for each size different study, and then arranging in each study a lot more accurate and objective. Assignment of whatever there are differences in sex and whether there are differences. When compare man to woman, assure me that positive disorders such as 0.20 or 0.15 indicate that man's occur higher than woman. Negative disorders such as 0.20 or 0.15 indicate that women soccer higher than men. For example, a door soccer of 0.55 means that women soccer much higher on a creative traitor. Next are two examples you can read. The picture is important to keep in mind the overlap in the distribution of the sex must be kept in mind when evaluation after sex. Over between the sex in content of a mean difference, even when one sex greatly exceeds the other in a practical ability. There is a large area of overlap. And the last topic, about the focus of sex difference debate. Sex differences are small and relatively encounter of substantial and important. The Malaysians think this reflects their small degree of influence for differences and whatever differences access do not have much practical importance for behavior and everyday life. But for the Malaysians is not. They think magnitude of sex difference is comparable to the magnitude of many other factors in psychology and should not be trivialized. According to this view, some sex differences tend to be small in magnitude. Others are large in magnitude and many are in the moderate range. That's all. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Wan Nur Syaidarul Alia binti Wan Adnan, and I will be presenting about sex differences in personality, especially for temperament in children and the 5-factor model. The sex difference of temperament in children is important as temperament itself reflects a biologically based emotional and behavioral consistencies that appear in early life and predict patterns and outcomes in numerous other domains such as psychopathology and personality. The authors that conducted the analysis of sex difference in temperament in children ranging in age from 3 to 13. 4 aspects have been analyzed, which are inhibitory control, perceptual sensitivity, suggestion, and negative affectivity. Firstly, inhibitory control. Inhibitory control reflects ability to control inappropriate responses or behaviors, and the most important aspect for inhibitory control is self-control. This, however, shows the largest sex difference with a mean of negative 0.41. Not only that, a recent study have also found a very large sex difference on the trait of impulsivity with a mean of negative 0.72, with boys being less able to control their impulses. With that being said, boys are seen to have less self-control in themselves and often do things in their own reflex. This aspect is also related to later development of the personality trait of conscientiousness. However, The sex difference appears to fade due to adult men and women do not differ much in consciousness, in which it will be explained later on. Secondly, perceptual sensitivity is the ability to detect subtle stimuli from the environment. It showed a sex difference that favors girls with a mean of negative 0.38. Everyone knows that girls tend to be sensitive than boys to subtle and low-intensity signals from their external world. Next, surgency. Surgency is a cluster that includes approach behavior, high activity, and impulsivity, showed a sex difference of 0.38 with boys scoring higher than girls. This can be combined with inhibitory control since it is said that boys tend to be less able to control their impulse as mentioned earlier, for the fact that they are more prone to get into more disciplinary difficulties in school during their early years. Activity level and high intensity pleasure showed a slightly less sex difference with a mean of 0.33 and 0.30 each. It is said to be consistent with the fact that boys are more likely to engage in rough and tumble play than girls. Another fact regarding the combination of low inhibitory control and high surgency is that another reliable gender differences appears, which is a difference in the domain of physical aggressiveness, in which boys at approximately age 13 are more physically aggressive than girls with a mean of 0.60. Lastly, negative affectivity that includes components such as anger, difficulty, amount of distress, and sadness showed no difference between boys and girls, unlike inhibitory control and surgency. However, a more detailed analysis on negative emotions found that girls score higher on fearfulness while boys score higher on anger expression with a mean of negative 0.34. To summarize, girls show more inhibitory control and higher fearfulness, meanwhile boys show higher levels of surgency, higher levels of activity, more impulsivity, and more anger in the domain of emotional expression. Moving on to the 5-factor model. As we all already know, the 5-factor model is consisted of extraversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and intellect openness to experience, or better known just as openness. This 5-factor model provides a broad set of personality traits within which we can examine whether men and women differ. Firstly, extraversion. There are 3 facets or aspects that were examined in this trait, and they are gregariousness, assertiveness, and activity. Gregariousness gives the meaning of fond of company, or in another word, sociable. Women score higher in this with a mean of negative 0.26, and also on another facet, which is warm, with a mean of negative 0.29. Men, however, score higher on assertiveness with 0.24 and excitement seeking with 0.25. Assertiveness is a quality of being self-assured and confident without being aggressive. Through a related finding, it is found out that men place a greater importance on the value of power, thus they tend to value social status and dominance over other people more than women. This can be seen by how men are almost always appointed to be a leader not only for a country but also for their family. There are also studies that suggest men interrupt others in conversation more often than women do in mixed-sex groups. These unwanted interruptions of dialogue may be the cause of the conflict between the sexes. Men also score higher, albeit slightly, in activity since, to compare with women, it can be seen how men often get involved or rather involve themselves in any activities that are being held and be excited about it. Secondly, agreeableness. Another 3 facets are examined in this trait, which are trust, tender-mindedness, and modesty. Trust is the proclivity to cooperate with others, giving others the benefit of the doubt, and viewing one's fellow human beings as basically good at heart. This facet shows women score higher than men, thus making women more trustworthy. Tender-mindedness is a nurturing proclivity in which they have empathy for others and being sympathetic with those who are downtrodden or people who are being treated badly by people in power. Women also score higher in this as well as modesty. A recent research has also stated that women seem to be more cooperative than men in mixed-sex social interactions, Meanwhile, men are slightly more cooperative than women in same-sex social interactions. Aggressiveness, however, falls at the opposite end of agreeableness, with men, to no one's surprise, are more physically aggressive than women. This shows up in personality tests, in aggressive fantasy, and in actual measures of behavior. The aggressive fantasy in which people imagine themselves aggressing against others actually show a large sex difference with an effect size of 0.84. It is said that men commit more violent crimes of all sorts, thus showing a large sex difference, especially after they hit puberty, and the reason for the gender difference is because women are much more sensitive to punishment, whereas men are inclined to take risks and oblivious to the punishments they may receive. However, relational aggression such as verbal insults and gossip about others show either no gender differences or a slight tendency for women to be higher. Next, another findings related to agreeableness is smiling. Women smile more often than men, with an effect size of negative 0.60. Smiling reflects an agreeable personality disposition, which means that women are more agreeable than men. However, some researchers view smiling as a sign of submissiveness rather than agreeableness. Some also argue that it is low-status people who do a lot of smiling. It is possible that smiling reflects agreeableness in some contexts and submissiveness in others. Thirdly, conscientiousness is a trait of being orderly and following the rules, and just like its definition, only one facet is being analyzed, and that is order. Although men tend to be aggressive or more assertive, women eventually score higher in this, albeit slightly. The effect size is only negative 0.13, even though a larger cross-cultural study revealed a slightly larger sex difference. Since the difference is small, it is safe to say that both genders are essentially the same on this dimension. Even so, the small difference could also lead to a large cumulative effects over time. For example, a small difference in order between marriage partners may result in a large number of arguments about house cleaning over the course of a year, which means that since there's only a small difference between both genders, they may actually want to order one another and thus eliciting an argument. Next, emotional stability, which is the most value-laden dimension of the five-factor model. Emotional stable is labeled to someone who are steady, calm, and stable as stated in Chapter 3. Meanwhile, the opposite of it, emotionally unstable, neurotic, or emotionally expressive is someone who is characterized by volatility and changeability of mood. This trait has specifically shown the largest sex difference with a mean of negative 0.49 indicates that women are moderately lower than men on this dimension. A study at 10 Arab countries, which are Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Oman, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq, shows similar sex differences using a measure of anxiety. Older adults ranging in age from 65 to 98 show sex difference of negative 0.52, with women scoring lower than men. Two facets are examined, anxiety and fearfulness, in which women have higher score than men. Anxiety especially has shown the largest gender difference across cultures, with a mean of negative 0.54. Meanwhile, in a detailed measures for fearfulness, the score for women is especially high, with negative 1.04. Lastly, intellect openness to experience. This trait uses three data sources, which are self-report, spouse report, and independent interviewer reports, which use one male and one female interviewer, in which all three have shown no sex difference. Before that, in a 50 culture study shows no difference with negative 0.07, similar to 55 culture study that found a difference of negative 0.05. A massive cross-cultural study of adolescents, college students, and adults also showed essentially no gender difference as well. Nonetheless, women have scored higher in two facets of openness that are fantasy with negative 0.31 and ideas with 0.02. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and greetings, everyone. I am Noor Ismail, and today I'm going to proceed our discussion to basic emotion in frequency and intensity and other dimensions of personality. Before that, I want to touch a little bit about the emotions. Many people discount the importance of emotions, but emotions help us in a variety of ways. Our emotional instinct helps us to assess threats, survive, and grow. But how do these emotions occur? There are a number of theories about how emotions occur, but in this discussion I'm going to focus only on the basic emotions. This is Dr. Robert Patrick. He created emotion wheel listing 8 basic emotions which are joy, acceptance, anticipation, surprise, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. We can think of these emotions as 4 pairs of opposites: joy and sadness, acceptance and disgust, fear and anger, surprise and anticipation. He also classified them as positive or negative emotion. Plato also proposed that the emotions vary in their intensity. You can see this diagram as an example. He has created this wheel of emotion to illustrate the various relationships among the emotions. Think of the emotion wheel as just one level of row in a solid cylinder, which you can see it at the top. The emotions at the top of the solid are more intense, while those at the bottom are less intense. Well, you can probably can see it easier if we spread the solid. Now you can see the colored flower, aka open cylinder. Notice that anger. If you see my arrow, I was pointed towards the anger. When more extreme is rage, while when less extreme is annoyance, merely an annoyance. The wheel can be used to navigate between the various intensities that emotions bring along and evoke. The wheel makes it possible to simplify incredible complex emotional concepts. Now, maybe some of you wonder what is frequency and what is intensity in emotion. So, basically, emotional frequency refers to how many times an individual experiences a particular emotion over a given period of time. For example, how many times do you experience sadness per week? While emotional intensity refers to variation in the magnitude of emotional responses. For example, when you're angry, do you feel hot boil inside? So it's like that. Next, this is an additional fact. If you want to estimate the intensity of an emotion, pay attention to their postures and gestures. As an example, someone who is angry tends to gesture very quickly and sharply. Okay, so research conducted on a cross-cultural scale has revealed where the sexes differ in their experiences of emotions and where the sexes are essentially the same. The most extensive study examined 2,199 Australians, an international sample of 6,868 participants drawn from 41 different countries. 8 fundamental emotions were examined: 4 positive emotions, which are affections, joy, contentment, and pride, and 4 negative emotions, which are fear, anger, sadness, and guilt. The participants used rating scales to indicate how frequently they experience each emotion and the intensity with which they experience each emotion. So what is rating scale? It is The common examples are like the Likert scale and 1 to 10 rating scales, for which a person selects the number which is constant to reflect the perceived quality of a product. We already covered it in the chapter 2. So the basic findings are summarized in 16.2. Okay, note that entries in the table are effect sizes. The NS indicates that sex difference was not significant. Positive values indicate that women report experiencing the emotions more frequently or intensely than men. As you can see in the table, most of the score values are positive values, and some are not significant. Hence, there are small but statistically significant differences in the experience of emotions in the sample. All points go to women experiencing both positive and negative emotions more frequently and intensely than men. In the positive domain, affection and joy shows the largest sex difference. Pride, in contrast, shows no sex difference in either frequency nor intensity. In the negative domain, women experience fear and sadness more than men, especially in the reported intensity of the experience. Guilt, in contrast, shows a minimal gender difference in intensity and no difference in frequency, perhaps contradicting the stereotype that women are more guilt-prone than men. Now, we will proceed to the other dimensions of personality. There are several dimensions of personality, but we will examine the three, which are number one, self-esteem, two, sexuality, emotional investment, and mating, and number three, people things dimension. First, we go through self-esteem. Most frequently measured component is a global self-esteem, which defined as the level of global regard that one has for the self as a person. Global self-esteem can range from highly positive to highly negative and reflects an overall evaluation to the self. It is linked with many aspects of functioning and is central to mental health. Those with high self-esteem appears to cope better with the stresses and strains of daily life. So, the met the meta-analysis has yielded an interesting pattern of sex differences. Meta-analysis is referred to a research strategy where instead of conducting new research with participants, the researchers examine the result of several previous studies. So in the analysis, the overall effect size is relatively small, which is the effect size is 0.21, with males score higher than females in self-esteem. The fascinating finding, however, emerged when the research analyzed sex differences in self-esteem according to the age of participants. Young children aged of 7 to 10 years old showed only slight sex differences in self-esteem, which is 0.16. As the children approached to adolescence, however, the gap between the sexes widened. At ages of 11 to 14, it was 0.23, and the sex difference peaked during the ages of 15 to 18, which is 0.33. Females seem to suffer from lower self-esteem than males as they hit their mid to late teens. The good news is that in adulthood, the self-esteem gap starts to close. At the age of 19 to 22 years, the effect size shrinks to 0.18. During the ages of 29 to 59, the sexes come even closer, with a 0.1, and during the older age, from 60 onwards, it is negative 0.03, which means that The males and females are virtually identical in self-esteem. Next, sexuality, emotional investment, and mating. There is an intimate relationship between sexuality and emotionality. Men and women, however, tend to approach that relationship from vastly different points of reference, and those differences clearly impact reaction to infidelity for each gender, whether that infidelity is emotional or sexual in very different ways. World Two reviews concluded that there were there exist large sex differences in the desire for sexual variety. Men are more likely to have more permissive attitudes towards casual sex, which means men are more likely to have excessive freedom and flexible towards having a non-committed sex. Men also view pornography more often than women in 0.63. Men are more likely than women to be sexual aggressive in the sense of trying to force women to have sex. But not all women, but but not all men actually sexual aggressive in the sense of trying to force them. Some studies show that men who indicate hostile masculinity and men who have lack of empathy are most likely to report using sexual aggression. So if men score higher in desire for sexual desire, women typically score higher in emotional investment. Emotional investment is when a person emotionally bonded with someone that comes as a point of attachment. A study of 48 nations found an average effect size of -0.39. It was interpreted that women show higher level of emotional attachment both to children and to romantic partners. Another dimension of personality has been labeled the people-things dimension. This refers to the nature of vocational interests. People who score towards the thing end of dimension prefer vocations that deal with impersonal objects, which are the machines, tools, or materials. For example, the list of occupations related to things and of dimension would be the carpenters, contractors, engineers, while those scoring towards people and of dimensions would prefer social occupation, which involve thinking about others, caring for others, or directing others. For example, the list of occupations related to people and of dimensions would be counselors, social workers, nurses, doctors, and etc. The correlation between sex and people-things dimension is 0.56, which means that men are likely to score things of dimension and women are more likely to score at people end. Hence, men score at things end and women scores at people's end. This people-thing dimension is important consequences in selections of occupation. The people-things distinction is similar to the emphasizing-systemizing distinction. Emphasizing refers to tuning in to other people's thoughts and feelings, while systemizing is a drive to comprehend how things work, how systems are built, basically how how it operates in the machine. Women score higher in advertising, while men score higher in systemizing, which may partially explain gender differences in occupational preferences. So, that's all for my part. I hope you can manage to absorb all of it. Next. we will continue our next discussion on masculinity, femininity, androgyny, and sex role by Azmeer. Here.
Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone. My name is Azmeer Abdullah and we will continue chapter 16, Sex, Gender and Personality. Masculinity, femininity, androgyny and sex roles. This topic will discuss about the search of androgyny and gender stereotypes. Women and men are differ in assertiveness, tender-mindedness, anxiety, as well as aggression, sexuality, and depression. The gender differs in many personality items, but does that mean there is such thing of masculinity, femininity, personality? Early 1970s, researchers started to challenge the single masculinity, femininity dimension, meaning that one can high on both masculinity and femininity, or one can low on both. There is also one can be stereotypically masculine, which means that high in masculinity and low in femininity, and one can be stereotypically feminine, which high in femininity and low in masculinity. So, during 1974, two major instruments published to assess people using the new conception of sex roles, which are BAM 1974 and Spence Hemrich Stubb 1974. Masculinity dimensions contain items like assertiveness, boldness, dominance, self-sufficiency, and instrumentality. If person scored high here, the person is said to be masculine, while femininity dimensions contains items of nurturance, expression of emotions, and empathy. And if the person scored high on both dimensions, the person will be labeled as androgynous. Androgynous is to reflect the notion that single person could possess both masculine and feminine characteristics. So, here are the conceptions of sex roles in 1970s. If you can look at here, if the person scored low on both dimensions, the person labeled as undifferentiated. Those who scored high masculinity and low femininity, the person is masculine. Those who low masculinity, high femininity is feminine, while to those who scored high masculinity and femininity is androgynous. Next slide. We will look at Disney princess portrayal, the classic Beauty and the Beast. At first, Princess Belle here portrayed as educated, intellect type of person, but becomes submissive to romantic with her beast. It only portrays one dimension to the character. Years pass and the conceptions portrayed in Princess and the Frog, where Princess Tiana and the Frog combining hard work and dreaming will help people reach their goals. That's androgynous portrayal. Androgyny concept have criticism, where it turns out masculinity and femininity indeed consist of single bipolar trait, meaning that those who score high femininity tend to score low on masculinity and vice versa. So, Janet Spence no longer believes her questionnaire assess sex roles, but she suggested it measures instrumentality and expressiveness. Instrumentality is personality traits that involve working with objects, getting tasks completed in a direct fashion, showing independence towards others, and displaying self-sufficiency. Expressiveness, which one can express emotions like crying, showing empathy for trouble with others, showing nurturance to those in need. Sandra Bam also changed her views. Her measure, which is BAM sets inventory, assess gender schemata. What is gender schemata? Gender schemata is a cognitive orientation that lead individual to process social information on the basis of sex-linked associations. Gender stereotype. Gender stereotype beliefs about how men and women differ or are supposed to be differ in contrast to what the actual differences are. There are three components in gender stereotypes, which are cognitive, affective, and behavioral. Cognitive deals with the ways in which we form social categories. The second component is affective. Affective may feel hostile or warm towards someone simply because you place the person in a particular social category. Third one is behavioral. As an example, you may discriminate against someone simply because he belongs in that social category. Next is content of gender stereotypes. Studies of gender stereotypes in over 30 countries viewed men as more aggressive, autonomous, achievement-oriented, dominant, exhibitionist, and persevering, while compared to women are commonly more affiliative, different, heterosexual, nurturing, and self-abasing. Those general stereotypes have common theme where women perceived as more communal, has the sense of belongings. They oriented towards the group. In contrast, men are more instrumental, asserting their independence from the group. By overestimating the magnitude of sex differences in personality than the size of it actually exists. 6 and Akis, 1991. They examine structure of participants' cognitive categories of men and women and came out with subtypes. So here is stereotypic subtypes of men and women. For male subtypes, playboy subtypes are the one is cool, casual, players, lady killer, and also macho. While career man subtype is the person who are social climbers and managers. While for female, the housewife, secretaries, maternal women are under classically feminine subtypes. Second subtypes for female is overt sexually subtypes. That includes sex bomb, sexually attractive, tars, many sexual partners, and vamps, charismatic and flirty female. Other subtypes for women involve intellectual, feminist, lefty ecologists, confident, are the career woman subtypes, like Hillary Clinton. Now we will talk about prejudice and gender stereotypes. Prejudice and gender stereotypes has damaging effects like legal decisions, medical treatment, where the men are more likely recommended coronary bypass surgery than women, even showing the same amount of heart damage. Next is car purchases, check cashing, and job hunting. Gender discrimination exists. Women subjected oftenly to sexual harassment than the men. To note that this affects both genders. Men are not excluded. Gender stereotypes become more harmful when it limits the capacity of men and women to develop their personal attributes or professional skills. Here is my advice. Be aware of sexism. Deal with issue of equality without complexes. Join forces for equal education. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Faten Nurfahira. I am the last presenter and I'll be presenting my part, which is the theory of sex differences. So there are 4 different theories on the theory of sex differences, which is the socialization and social role theory, hormonal theory, evolutionary psychology theory, and integrated theory. We will start with the socialization theory. Socialization theory stated that boys and girls become different because boys are reinforced by parents, teachers and medias for being masculine and girls for being feminine. This theory is most widely held for theory of sex differences in personality. I like to summarize the theory like this. During childhood, boys are given more trucks and cars, while girls are given more dolls. Boys are praised for being tough and competitive, and girls are praised for being cute and nice. Same goes to boys are punished for crying, but girls are comforted when they cry. In Bandura's social learning theory, a variant to socialization theory, it mentioned that boys and girls learn by observing others, which is so-called models. For example, boys watch their fathers, male teachers and male peers, and girls watch their mother, female teachers and female friends. As such, boys watch how their father works and girls will see how their mother cooks. These models will eventually provide a guide to behavior for masculine and feminine. There is an empirical evidence that actually support the socialization theory. A study has shown that parents, both father and mother, encourage dependency more in girls than in boys. Girls are encouraged to stay at home, while boys are encouraged to roam and explore the world. Boys have more physical play with fathers compared to girls, and boys receive a greater variety of toys such as trucks, cars, and sport equipment, while girls receive more dolls, pink clothing, and furnishings. Moving on to the cross-cultural evidence, in many cultures, fathers do not interact much with daughters compared to sons. In some cultures, girls are assigned to more domestic chores, while boys are permitted to stay far from home. Girls are raised to be more nurturing compared to boys who are raised to be more competitive. Girls are more sexually restrained. Girls are told to delay their sexual intercourse, while boys are encouraged to have sexual intercourse. According to the prediction of traditional theories of socialization, parents socializing children in sex-linked ways, in which children eliciting parents in behavior correspond to their sex-linked preferences. In a more easier way to understand, it means that the interests of the children drive the parents' behavior. As such, if boys show no interest in dolls and girls show no interest in trucks, so parents will purchase more masculine toys for boys and more girly toys for girls. Traditional theories of socialization provide no accounts of the origins for differential parental socialization practices. Why parents treat their children differently? Ideally, the theory of the origin of sex differences should be able to account for the origins of sex-linked socialization practices. In sum, parents just treat their children based on gender, as if the boys should grow up into more like their father and girls should grow up like their mother. But the reason of why parents treated their children differently still remain a mystery. Next, social role theory is a theory that sex differences originate because men and women are distributed differently into different occupational and family roles. For instance, men are assumed to hold the breadwinner roles and girls are expected to assume the homemaker roles. So, boys learn to be rough and grow up into qualities expected of the breadwinner, whereas girls grow up to be more nurturing and emotionally supportive, linked to the homemaker roles. Same goes to the socialization theory. Social role theory also fails to provide an account to the origin of sex-linked practices. However, social role theory is becoming increasingly testable since family and occupational changes. Technically, women nowadays have become more independent and assuming the breadwinner roles more often than the past. The second theory is hormonal theory. Hormonal theory mentioned that men and women do not differ because of external social environment, but rather because men and women have different underlying hormones. There is some evidence that mention hormonal influences on sex differences begin in uterus. Hormonal bath that the developing fetus exposed to, for example, might affect both organization of the brain, the gender interests, and also the activities of individual. There is one evidence that comes from a condition called congenital adrenal hyperplasia (CAH), in which female fetus have an overactive adrenal glands that results in female being hormonally masculinized. Young girls with congenital adrenal hyperplasia will show interest in male toys, and as in adult girls with CAH, they will show superiority in masculine carriers. Men and women differ in level of circulating hormones, like testosterone. In women, the lowest part of menstrual cycle, testosterone falls between 200 and 400 picograms per milliliter of blood, while in the highest part of menstrual cycle, testosterone falls between 285 and 440 picograms per milliliter of blood. While in men, the testosterone level falls between 5,140 and 6,460 picograms per milliliter of blood, which is more than 10 times the levels of women. Circulating testosterone is linked with traditional sex difference in behaviors such as aggression, dominance, and carrier choice. When testosterone level high in both sexes, it may lead to greater aggressiveness and also greater dominance. However, if women have an extra high level of testosterone, then they are linked with pursuing the masculine carrier. Sexual desires and hormones. Sexual desires link to testosterone level, but only in women. In women, when testosterone level peak just in time to ovulation, women are reported to peak sexual desire precisely the same time. At this time, women will do more female-initiated sexual intercourse and women will have more desire for sexual intercourse. Those findings do not prove that differences between men and women results from difference in testosterone level. As the saying goes, correlation does not mean causation. However, some evidence shows that sexual arousal can result in testosterone level. A study shows that sport fans found that the team who just won has high testosterone level than the team that just lost who has lower testosterone level. Therefore, Therefore, high level of testosterone may result as well as cause changes in behavior. Next is moving on to the evolutionary psychology theory. Evolutionary psychology theory. According to evolutionary psychology perspective, the sexes are predicted to be similar in all domains in which they face similar adaptive challenges over human evolutionary history. Adaptive challenges are problems that need to be solved in order for an individual to survive. For instance, both sexes have the same taste preferences for sugar, salt, fat, and protein. Thus, the fast food restaurants are famous nowadays. In sum, the food preferences reflect a solution to an important adaptive problem such as nutrients to survive. In domain of mating and sexuality, both sexes confront different adaptive problems. In reproduction, women will have to carry and gestate fetus for 9 months, while men are able to reproduce through a single act of sex. Due to that, women face adaptive problems in preparing resources to fetus during hot days such as winter and drought, and when the resources scarce, women become mobility restricted due to the burden of the pregnancy. As a result, a heavy investment for reproduction was made. Women evolve exacting mate preferences for man who is able and willing to invest or commit to the female and their children. Poor choice of mate is said to be more damaging for women than men. Since women have to be extra valuable in men, men will be more sexually indiscriminate and more aggressive with other men about pursuing opportunities for sexual access to women. There is an actual empirical evidence that men will take more physical risks, like I've mentioned before, in order for men to secure resources and status that women desirable in marriage partners. Therefore, men will have a greater desire for sexual variety than women do, a greater number of sex partners, and men will seek sex in a shorter period of time, and also they will have more fantasies about casual sex. The last theory is integrated theory. Integrated theory take all analyses into account because they are compatible to each other. Evolutionary psychology theory suggests why sexes is different, but does not specify how they become different. Hormonal and socialization theory specify how sexes become different, but not why the sexes are different. As such, how parents interested in socializing boys and girls differently have become a universal thing these days. Both men and women changes behavior to the roles they adapt, like I've said in the previous slide on how children learn from their parents about the roles of masculine and feminine. Men and women differs in circulating of testosterone level, mainly with differences in sexuality, aggression, dominance, and career interests. A causal possibility in some evidence stated that being in a dominant position causes the testosterone to rise. Thus, this indicates somewhat social roles and hormonal theory are closely linked and much necessary for integrated theory of sex differences. So, that is that from me and my group. Thank you for your time and Salam Ramadan.